Installing this one tool and configuring a particular module could have saved a client of mine thousands of dollars. Hello, my name is Steven, and I am a DFIR consultant with over half a decade of experience within cybersecurity, focusing in the security operations domain. A large part of my job is to respond to security incidents impacting my clients' confidentiality, integrity, and/or availability within their organization. In today's video, I want to share with you one important module that you can configure from Wazuh, which is a free and open source tool that you can spin up right away to protect your organization. And by the end of the video, you'll learn more about this module and how you can configure it for your organization or client. But first, a story. A couple years ago, a small company, let's call it Accounting X, had called the incident response hotline, and I was the lucky winner who picked up the phone and began to talk to Bob, who was the CEO of Accounting X. Now, I could hear the uncertainty and fear in Bob's voice as he mentioned that he was unable to access any of his files and his whole staff couldn't do any work. What Accounting X had experienced was a ransomware attack, which is malware that encrypts your files and holds it for ransom, hence the name ransomware. And this is quite common, unfortunately. I quickly found out what their technology stack that Accounting X was using so I could understand what available log sources and evidence I may be able to obtain. Long story short, they had an on-premise Active Directory environment with a total of 20 computers with default settings. So in other words, there were no auditing policies that were configured. For antivirus, they were using Windows Defender, which is natively installed on every computer. But don't get me wrong, Microsoft Defender on its own is pretty good. But you might be wondering, so how did Accounting X become a victim of ransomware? It wasn't through phishing, which is an attack that is delivered through email to entice users to accomplish an objective, whether that is executing malware or entering in their credentials. It was actually through another common attack vector, which was through an exposed remote desktop protocol port on their web server. What this meant was that anybody on the internet was able to access this web server through the common remote desktop protocol port of 3389 on TCP. And they could try and break in via brute force, which is what unfortunately appeared to happen. During my investigation, Windows Defender was actually disabled and multiple files were staged under the public users directory. In other words, the attacker's toolset was uploaded to the public users directory. This directory and many others, such as the temporary directory, are quite popular among attackers to upload their toolset to carry out their attacks. So having the capability to monitor for any changes within these directories can quickly help you identify potential evil, as this could be a precursor to a ransomware attack. Now, monitoring directories and files could also allow you to identify an insider threat who may be a disgruntled employee looking to cause harm to the organization. So what can you do to enable your organization to have this kind of capability? Well, if you haven't heard of Wazuh, I would highly recommend you go and take a look at their platform, as it is a free open source SIM and XDR tool that you can deploy within seconds. And they have a built-in module called FIM, which is short for File Integrity Monitoring, that does exactly as it sounds. It can monitor the integrity for both files and directory changes, such as add, delete, or modify, which is incredibly useful. Now, Accounting X might have been able to prevent this ransomware attack if they had processes in place, people who were trained with security in mind, and a centralized platform to review alerts that were generated due to suspicious activity. If you do want to learn more about Wazuh, I do have a 5-part project series on my channel, which I will link down below, that will teach you how to spin up your own Wazuh instance. Going forward, I am going to assume that you have Wazuh up and running, and I will walk you through on how you can configure FIM so you can start implementing this in your organization or home lab or even for your client. For this demo, I'll be using a Windows Server 2022 acting as my target machine, and I'll be using Wazuh version 4.8, which is the latest version as of recording. If you want to learn how to get started with Wazuh, I did create a 5-part project series called the SOC Automation Project, which I will leave a link down below. In this version, Wazuh had made some changes within its user interface, making this a much more cleaner look than previous. However, one major update for this particular release is its vulnerability detector module. The change in this module increases coverage and improves reliability by using a centralized feed of curated vulnerabilities maintained by Wazuh. What this means is that Wazuh now has its own cyber threat intelligence platform where it'll retrieve data from and will no longer download external vulnerability feeds indexed by other vendors. If you want to learn more about the new features for this version, I will leave a link down below as well. Now, it is quite common for attackers to upload their toolsets onto directories such as the public user directory and/or temporary directory. In this particular demo, I'll be walking you through on how you can configure FIM, aka File Integrity Monitoring, to monitor the public users directory. To get started, we must first add an agent onto our Windows Server 2022. And to do that, I'll simply click on Add Agent, and then I'll select my operating system. In my case, I am using Windows, so I'll select the MSI option. Scrolling down, we do need to enter in our server address. So this right here is the Wazuh server. For me, my Wazuh server address is 192.168.100.151. If you're following along, your address is likely going to be different than mine. So do make sure that you double check your Wazuh manager address. Step number 3, these are optional settings and I will be leaving this as blank. At the bottom for number 4, it says run the following commands to download and install the agent. So what I'll do here is I'll go ahead and click on copy command and I'll head over to my Windows Server 2022. Over to my server, go ahead and open up PowerShell and I'll right click and run as administrator. From here, I'll go ahead and paste in our command and then I'll hit enter. While that downloads, let's head back over to our Wazuh manager. And then we'll move on to step number 5, which is start the agent. So I'll go ahead and copy the command again, head over to my server 2022. And once this is completed, I'll go ahead and paste in the command and hit enter. Now it says the Wazuh service is starting. The Wazuh service was started successfully. Awesome. Now that that's good to go, let's head back over to our Wazuh dashboard and then we'll take a look to see if our agent is communicating back to our manager. I'll go ahead and close the screen and we do see one that is disconnected. So I'll wait a couple minutes and then refresh the page. All right, after waiting a couple minutes here, I'm going to select refresh. And now, awesome, it went from disconnected to active. And if we look at the bottom here, we have our agent ID, which is 001. We have the name, we have the IP address, and the operating system itself. And it is running on version 4.8. Now, if we want to configure FIM to start monitoring our public users directory, we must perform some configurations within the OSEC configuration file itself. And you can find that on the agent. So with that being said, let's head back over to our Windows server and I'll go ahead and minimize my PowerShell and let's open up a file explorer. Now the OSEC configuration file is located under the computer, C drive, program files x86, OSEC-agent. And then if we scroll down just a little bit here, we do see an osec.com file. This is the configuration file that we'll be editing. Now for best practice, you do want to make a copy of this. So I'll go ahead and right click, copy, and I'll just paste this in here. I'll rename the copied file to osec-backup. That way, anytime we do modify our original OSEC configuration file and we happen to mess something up, we can always revert it back using the osec-backup.com file. With that being said, let's go ahead and right click our osec.com file and click on open with, and I'll select try an app on this PC. That way I can select notepad and hit OK. And this is how our agent is communicating over to our manager. We can see our Wazuh manager address here, which again is 192.168.100.151, and it is communicating on port 1514. To configure FIM, you do want to scroll down until you hit File Integrity Monitoring, which is right here. Now I will full screen this and just zoom in just a little bit. So as I mentioned earlier, attackers love to upload their toolset onto public users directory. Now if you're not too familiar with how Windows is structured, you might be asking, where exactly is the public users directory? Well, if I head over to my file explorer, click on this PC, head over to the C drive, click on users, we do see a user called public. Let's go in there. And then here are the common directories for this public user. Attackers love to put their tools into any of these directories here. And by using FIM, we could start monitoring for these directories for any added files, deletions, or changes, and then start investigating if we are not expected to see any file modifications towards these public directories. For this particular example, let's just imagine that we are the attacker and we're going to be uploading our toolset onto public pictures. And before we begin creating any files, I did want to show you the file integrity monitoring dashboard in the Wazuh dashboard. So if we head over back to our Wazuh, clicking on the hamburger icon on the top left corner, there is a tab called Endpoint Security. Go ahead and click on that. And we can click on File Integrity Monitoring. So this right here is the dashboard for our FIM. At the top, we do have 3 different options. We have the dashboard, inventory, and events. For the dashboard is quite self-explanatory. It is the dashboards that are created automatically by Wazuh. If we head over to inventory, this will show us a snapshot of what FIM is currently monitoring. And then when we head over to events, this is essentially the discovery tab if you're familiar with Wazuh or the ELK stack. If not, this section essentially will show you all of the alerts that are generated by the FIM module. As noted on the left-hand side, we do see Wazuh-alerts. Now let's head over to our inventory here. We currently see no agent is selected. So let's go ahead and select our agent, which is this one right here. And now we have files and registries. There are 11 current files that are being monitored and 4,286 registries. Going back over to our FIM configuration file, I just want to very quickly go over what are some of the options here. Beginning with disabled, currently it is set to no, so this means that FIM is enabled by default. At the bottom, we do have our frequency, and this is by seconds. So this is 43,200 seconds. In other words, 12 hours. So what this means is that every 12 hours, FIM will check to see if there's any modifications towards files, directories, or registries. Now we could change the frequency to, let's say, 10 seconds, as this is a demo, and I do want to make sure that we are capturing modifications within a timely manner. At the bottom here, we do have default files to be monitored, and this is where we can include additional files or directories for FIM to monitor. And then we do have 32-bit programs, similar to above. This is where we can put in programs that we want monitored. And finally, we do have Windows registries as well. Let's start putting our attacker hat on and create a file under the public pictures directory. So what I'll do here is I'll just right-click, click on New, and select Text Document. Let's name this as evil-malware. And let's pretend that this right here is our ransomware binary. Now over to our Wazuh dashboard. If we head over to events, we currently do not see any events here. Now if I were to refresh this, still we do not have any events. Now why is that? Well, if you recall, our frequency was set to 43,200 seconds, aka 12 hours. But we did change it to 10 seconds. However, one thing I did forget to do is restart the Wazuh service. So anytime you make a configuration change within the osec.conf file, you must restart the Wazuh service. And to do that, I'll type in services, and the service that we want to restart is called Wazuh. So right here. Now, before I restart the Wazuh service, I am going to remove the evil-malware file. The reason being is because once I restart Wazuh, FIM will essentially update its snapshot, and it will also include the evil-malware, and we don't want that. So I'll go ahead and delete this, and then I'll go ahead and restart the Wazuh service by right-clicking and selecting Restart. Now our configuration file is updated with the frequency of 10 seconds. So FIM will monitor for any changes every 10 seconds. Just to make sure, I am going to go into my Wazuh dashboard. Now we don't see anything under the events, but if we head over to inventory, we do see a change under the Windows registry, which is now 6,027. I'll head over to my Windows Server 2022. We can start creating a file again. So I'll right click, New, and Text Document. I'll name this as, let's just put a different name, malware-evil. Over to our Wazuh dashboard, I'll click on Events and refresh. Now we aren't getting any events from the newly created file under the public user's picture directory. And this is because we haven't configured FIM to monitor for that directory just yet. This is how you can start configuring FIM to monitor for these directories. Now you do have two options here. You can go ahead and select the exact directory, which in this case is C users public pictures. Or what you can do is click back and then use the following file path, C users public. By doing it this way, if an attacker uploaded their toolset under public documents, then you will also be able to capture that. Whereas if you were to configure FIM to only monitor for the public pictures directory, you would miss the activity that was done within the public documents directory. With that being said, I am going to be using this directory, which is again, C users public. And I am going to use the same entry right above it, but I'll just make a little bit of modifications here. What I'll do is copy this. And then at the bottom, I'll go ahead and paste this in. Just like so. And I'll remove restrict. And from here, I'll enter in our directory of interest, which again is C:\users\public. Save out the file. Before we restart our Wazuh service, I did want to mention this recursion_level here. If it is set to recursion level 0, it is only going to be looking at this public directory. FIM is not going to be looking into any of these other directories, so public videos, public pictures, public music, downloads, and documents. What you can do is set this to 1, and then it will drill down into one directory, like so. If you were to select 2, then it will drill into 2 directories. So public documents, and let's say there's another directory called new folder, then FIM will monitor for files in here as well. Now, if you're not sure how many directories you want FIM to take a look at, what you can do is remove recursion level, just like so, and then FIM will just monitor for everything. So I'll go ahead and save this, and let's make sure that our file is removed. So there's nothing in here. And under my public documents, I do have a new folder, that's okay. Now we can go ahead and restart Wazuh. Now in theory, if I were to create a new file and name this as malware-evil, FIM should pick this up and display it as an alert. And if we take a look at our events, we do indeed see our file here. The C users public pictures malware-evil.txt. And the event is added. One cool thing that I want to show you here is if you click on the arrow to expand the event, we do have our agent ID, which is 001, the agent IP address, the agent hostname, the full file path, which is right here. And one important field here is the file hash itself. So it contains the MD5, SHA-1, and SHA-256. What this means is that you can take this file hash and use open source intelligence to obtain additional context for it. Or you can integrate third-party tools such as VirusTotal into Wazuh itself. Honestly, FIM is such a great tool that I highly recommend that you configure it to monitor for your sensitive directories or files that should either never or rarely be modified. And if any of those occur, then you can begin your investigation to determine if that activity was legitimate or not. With that being said, let's do another example here. So over to my Windows server, I am going to pretend that under my public documents directory, there is a file called bank-account. And just for fun, I'll name this as 12345, save this out. In our fictitious company, this bank account file should never be modified. And let's say an attacker on our machine went ahead and double-clicked our bank-account file and modified it to 4321. I'll save this out. Now, if we take a look at our Wazuh and refresh this, we now see our bank account with a modified event. And this right here is huge. Because if, again, this file were to be never or rarely modified, and if we do see a modified activity, as a security analyst, we're now alerted and we can begin our investigation. The last example I wanted to show you here is a registry key that is commonly used for persistence. For this example, I'll open up PowerShell, I'll clear out the screen here, and I'll use the following command. What this command does is that it creates a registry key under the HKey local machine run key, and it will be named updates that will run the following executable. Now, this is a fake executable, so it's not going to really do anything. However, the concept here that I wanted to show you is that if an attacker created persistence via a registry run key FIM would be able to monitor for that and alert you for any added, modified, or deleted registry keys. I'll go ahead and hit enter here. And before we check Wazuh, I did want to show you under the MITRE attack framework, this is the particular tactic and technique that attackers love to use to achieve persistence. And this is called the boot or logon auto start execution registry run keys / startup folder. And by default, FIM monitors for the bottom 2 registry paths. And with the command above is an example of this technique. Over to our Wazuh dashboard, I'll go ahead and click on refresh. And on the second entry, we do see our HKey local machine run key with an event of added. If I were to expand this, we can see that the name is update. So this is how you can use FIM to monitor for sensitive files, directories, or registry keys that have been either added, modified, or deleted. Now, if the client Accounting X had a centralized solution such as Wazuh up and running and had FIM monitoring for sensitive directories, they might have been able to detect suspicious activity prior to the ransomware execution. Now that I've gone through a basic example of how FIM works, I wanted to show you an advanced setting that you can configure for FIM called whodata. Whodata works for both Linux and Windows, and this allows FIM to obtain additional information about the monitored file, including who made the changes to the file and what program or process was used to make the change. By enabling whodata, FIM will automatically monitor for changes in real time rather than a given frequency, which I showed earlier. And as a side note, you can actually configure FIM to monitor directories in real time. And I'll show you how you can do that. So let's head over to our Windows Server machine. And under our osec.conf file, I'll go ahead and right click this, open with, Notepad. And then we want to scroll down to our FIM, which is right here. So currently our frequency is set to 10 seconds. I'll just go ahead and change this to 43,200, which again is 12 hours. Next, I'll modify the line entry that contains our directory of interest, which is the second line right here. All I need to do is just go ahead and include real time equals yes in quotes, and that's it. Now, do keep in mind that the directory that you want to monitor must exist before you restart the Wazuh service. Otherwise, FIM will ignore the directory until you restart it. This is why I mentioned earlier that anytime you modify anything within the osec.conf file, you must restart the Wazuh service. So let's go ahead and save out this file, and I'll open up my services, and we want to restart the Wazuh service. So I'll go ahead and right click and restart. With our updated change, FIM's frequency is now checking in every 12 hours, but is monitoring our public users directory in real time. And to demo this, I'll go ahead and open up another file explorer, and then I'll navigate over to our public user directory, which is under our C drive, users, and public. Within this folder, I'll go ahead and create a new file. I'll create a text document, and I'll name it as fim-test. Now, let's head over to our Wazuh events and let's see what we can find. Over to our Wazuh, I'll go ahead and just refresh this page. And here we can actually see 3 additional events that were created. So the first event is added, and this is the new text document, which is the file that we created. And then after that, we have deleted because we renamed the new text document file over to fim-test. And then we do see the event right here. Continuing on with whodata, in this demo, I'll be showing you how to configure this on Windows, and I'll provide you a link to the official documentation where it will include Linux if you're interested. When it comes to configuring whodata for Windows, an important note here is that it uses Microsoft's Windows auditing subsystem, specifically the Object Access, Audit File System, and Audit Handle Manipulation Policy, along with System Access Control List for each monitored directory. What this means is that if you're running Windows Vista or Windows Server 2008, you'll need to manually enable these policies and configure System Access Control List for each monitored directory in order for whodata to work properly. However, if you are running a later Windows operating system such as Windows 10, by enabling whodata, it should configure these for you automatically. And if it doesn't, then you'll need to manually configure them, which I will show you later. To configure whodata, let's head back over to our server and open the osec.conf file. So right here is our osec.conf, and the one that we're interested in is our line 2 right here, which contains our directory of interest. And I'll remove the real-time portion because if you recall, by enabling who data, FIM will begin monitoring in real time, and I'll replace it with who data. Now we can go ahead and save out this configuration file, and then we'll restart our Wazuh service. And again, by enabling who data, this allows FIM to obtain additional information about the monitored file, which will include who made the changes to the file and what program or process was used to make the change. Now that the service has been restarted successfully, I am going to open up our new file that we just created, which is the fim-test. And what I'll do is I'll type in testing, save the file, and now head over to our Wazuh dashboard. I'll go ahead and refresh this. And we do see a new entry of modified. Let's go ahead and expand the event, scrolling down here. And taking a look at the available field names, we do see some field names for process name and username. I'll put a side-by-side difference on the screen where the left does not have who data enabled and the right has who data enabled. You can see on the right-hand side that it includes the username and process, whereas on the left, it doesn't include any of that information. One last addition that we can include to provide even more data to us is to include report changes into our OSEC configuration file. So you guessed it, let's head back over to our server. Opening up our OSEC configuration file, and I'll include report underscore changes equals yes. And I'll put that in quotes as well. Now let's go ahead and save out the file and restart the service. By adding and enabling report changes, FIM will now provide us with what exactly was changed within our text file. And I'll go ahead and open up our public directory and let's create another file. And I'll call this school-grades. Open up the file and I'll give myself an A+. Now save this out. And let's pretend that a student gained unauthorized access onto this particular computer, and then went ahead and changed my grades from A+ to an F. Save that out, exit this, and let's head over to our Wazuh dashboard. Scrolling all the way up, I'll go ahead and refresh this and take a look at the chain of events. Starting from the bottom here, we have a new text document that was added, and then it was school grades, which was renamed. And at the top, we do have a modified event. So let's go ahead and expand the event here. Scrolling down, and there is a new field name called syscheck.diff, which will show us what exactly was changed, where the before value is at the top and the after is at the bottom. Now, the before value is blank, and that is because when we created our school grades text file, it was blank. And then we included A+, which is what we see at the bottom. Now, I went ahead and refreshed our dashboard, and we do see a second modified event. Expand this one, scroll down, and let's take a look at our syscheck.diff. Again, the before value is at the top, which we can see is A+, and the after value is F. Hopefully, you can see how powerful FIM can be if configured. Now, if for some reason by enabling who data, you're missing information on Windows, or if you're using an earlier version of Windows, this is how you can manually configure your settings to have who data work as expected. Onto our server machine, I'll first start by configuring the audit policies that are required for who data to work. I'll click on the start menu and I'll type in GP edit. What this will do is open up the local group policy editor, and you want to expand Windows settings, expand security settings, and then advanced audit policy configuration, security audit policies, select object access, and you'll want to enable both audit file system and audit handle manipulation. And we only want successes. So I'll double click audit file system, click on configure the following audit events and select success. I'll click on apply and OK. The next thing we want is audit handle manipulation. Double click that, configure the following audit events, click on success, hit apply and OK. Now, if your computer doesn't allow configuring these through the advanced audit policy configuration, then you can configure them via local policies, which is at the top right here. So I'll expand this and we can select audit policy. From here, we can double click audit object access and we only want successes. Click on apply and hit OK. And that is it for the auditing policies. As for the system access control list, you want to head over to the directory that you want monitored. In my case, it is the public users directory. So I'll go back one directory, and this is the one that we want. I'll go ahead and right click the public directory and click on properties. You want to head over to security, click on advanced, select the auditing tab, and then you want to make sure that there is a success entry in this tab. If not, you can manually create it by clicking on add, click on select a principal, and we want to type in everyone. Click on check names and hit OK. We want to leave the type as success and applies to this folder, subfolders, and files. Select show advanced permissions on the right and click on clear all. The only permissions that we want are create files / write data, create folders / append data, write attributes, delete, and change permissions. Then after that, click on OK. Lastly, if you're ever stuck and require additional information on troubleshooting, Wazuh has amazing documentation that you can reference, and they also have an awesome community where people are willing to help. I'll leave both documentation and where you can join the community for further assistance down below. I hope by following along you learned something new and are eager to try this out in your home lab or organization. Monitoring changes done by files and directories will cause a lot of false positives. But the more you baseline your environment, the better your chances are to finding something interesting. And once you do find something interesting, you could actually configure Wazuh to do additional things, such as initiating an active response or integrating third-party tools to obtain additional context. If you're interested in seeing more Wazuh content, let me know in the comment section down below. This video was sponsored by Wazuh, and a huge thank you to them for their support. And that is it for the video. I hope that you found that informative. If you did, let me know by hitting that like button and subscribe if you want to. Remember to stay curious and do things differently.